Okay, Sheila, thank you so much for doing the legislative updates today for our K through 12 meeting. And Lisa, I saw that you just joined as well. We think that something may have happened with the Zoom link. So if everyone is okay with recording, we're going to record so that Sheila can go through this and that it can be educational and helpful for those that haven't been able to join today.
Sounds good. Well, friends, it's good to see everyone on a Friday. We're concluding week 3 of the legislative session, and it is exhausting. So, this session has been really, really odd, and I'm going to go through a couple key bills that are on the screen with us right now. But I think before we get started, just to talk about the difference in this legislative session and the feeling and the temperature of this legislative session compared to previous legislative sessions that you might have been a part of or watched. And is this feels a very slow moving. Prior to session kicking off in Florida, we have a 60-day sprint to the finish line. This year is March to May. In election years, it goes January to March, so it's an earlier session. So 60 days. And during that 60 days, that's when bills can be voted on the chamber floor, either in the House and the Senate. Bills actually they get filed, they're debated and discussed much earlier in the process. Actually, everyone convenes in Tallahassee for a couple months through the committee process. And so this year in the committee process, because it's the first committee process outside of election, there's a lot of presentations too. So for instance, in the K-12 space, what is the Florida Education Finance Program, right? The primary mechanism for funding public education. What is the FEFP? So there's a lot of those presentations. And then there's presentations like workshops, panel discussions, as committees and subcommittees start to think about what are policy proposals we want to champion this year. And so this year in part, and all of that usually happens prior to session starting so that bills can be filed, bills can be voted on in committee, and that they would be in a posture for the House or the Senate floor by the time session rolls around. And that is what allows us to have a 60-day sprint to the finish line, is all the pre-work that is done ahead of time. This year's legislative session really was taken up all of our committee weeks. We had multiple special sessions, which ate our committee week processes. So I will tell you, even as late as this week in week 3, we were having panel discussions and workshops on potential policy proposals. So really feels slower than usual that we don't have an education bill on the floor being voted on week 3. And that's important because in a 9-week session, we usually start ramping down committee meetings by week 6, week 7. And bills have to go through anywhere from 2 to 4 committee stops, depending on the bill, 2 to 4 committee stops in the chamber, then go to the floor to get voted on, right? They have to be heard 3 times on the Senate floor and the House floor, and then, swap back and forth into the different chambers. All that to say that, we might not see a lot of policy proposals this legislative session out of education, which is not a horrible thing. We have passed, anywhere from 40 to 50 new policy proposals in K-12 education every single year for the last couple of years. And so to not have a lot of policy proposals is not a horrible thing to have a pause button 1 year. But just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a temperature. The other thing that possibly could happen is we end up with 2 or 3 really large bills that have everything in the kitchen sink inside of them. So things we're keeping an eye on this legislative session because it is a slightly different session. But I did put some bills on the board for you all, the kind of in 3 buckets. The first bucket is what I call the agency-backed bills. These are bills that the Department of Education has championed. It has various language, so like 875 around educator preparation. This is really focused on our pre-service teachers and how we are preparing teachers. There's components around professional development too for our existing teachers, so both pre-service and in-service requirements. But 875 is an interesting bill because it opens almost every single statute in the education code. So if there is going to be a train of, like one bill with lots of policy proposals, 875 has all the makings to be it because of the number of statutes it opens. So like a bill has to reference certain statutes, and this bill has referenced the entire education code. A couple other bills in there, 1255, 1307, 1618, 1624. These bills do various things. Actually kind of a lot bit of everything in the education space. Again, kind of opening multiple pieces, and they're being amended, which is really interesting because there's a couple movements happening on these bills. Um, so that's one set of bills, and you can go to the My Florida House website to learn a little bit more. So for instance, 1255 is talking about critical teacher shortages a little bit. They talk about health education, a little bit of everything is on 1255. 1307, I think that's by Temple, who comes out of a school district, and he's really focusing on in his bill like some terminology changes. They're focusing on like more the college system being able to get certain credits. So slightly different pieces, and also focusing on, I think, Title IV, if I remember correctly. The two Senate bills are companions into some of these other bills, so you get a lot of the same language. So that's agency-backed bills. Bills that are getting attention this year is 1367 around school attendance. This is by freshman Erica Booth and freshman Danny Nix of the who are recently elected. This is focusing on chronic absenteeism, and I will tell you that both of these members realize that as they tackle absenteeism and what that means for student achievement, they're looking at a multi-year solution. So what do they need to pass this year? What do they need to do in future years? But it is focused around the different types of absenteeism. It talks about redefining what is an excused absence, what is chronic absenceism. And then it does have the State Board of Education do a lot around statewide attendance policies. So that bill is getting a ton of attention. House Bill 921 has received a lot of attention actually this week around requiring education in cursive. There is a large push for, classical, more classical education over the last several years, and cursive writing is a part of that. The main, I guess, data point for why, and it's not even a data point, but the main talking point for why we should push cursive writing in schools is because students can't read grandma or grandpa's handwriting anymore. Even this week, I had a very interesting debate with several school districts and school board members about from their perspective, the importance of cursive writing. Although there is no data that kind of pushes cursive writing from maybe critical thinking standpoint, but this would be if passed, it is another required instruction. I will tell you that's probably the biggest con that folks have pushed back on, which is another required component in the instruction for public school classrooms on the educator. So that's 921. And then of course 261, middle school, high school, and start times. And this is this bill in particular. If you remember a couple years ago under Speaker Renner, this was a big priority to move the school day back so later, start later, to give kids that opportunity to sleep in a little bit. So 261 will actually change that because by law, those start times are mandatory, I think, this upcoming school year. And if 261 passes, and it is moving pretty well, it would allow school districts to make that decision. It would put it in district choice, which is where it has always been, district choice. So those are bills getting a lot of attention. And then I think some bills that are of interest to this group, really around virtual instruction and career planning opportunities, but we're not seeing a ton of tech bills. So there's no computer science bill, no AI bill around education. There are some data privacy bills that we see every year that continue to be there. 871 focuses on allowing school districts to have more hybrid, so virtual instruction plus in-person instruction. So what I like to call brick and click. So not just your brick and mortar or your virtual, but brick and click. But it's changing some of the statutory language that has made that difficult from a funding component for school districts. It does also allow students who are enrolled through the Family Empowerment Scholarship. So the FES scholarship, our state scholarship program, that they can use, they could enroll into a virtual program at a private school. So that that is allowable if this bill passes. So that's the virtual instruction. And then 571, I think the last bill that of interest to our friends here at Tech Hub South Florida, because it deals with workforce, is this career planning opportunities. And really, it's going to mandate some work-based learning opportunities. It's going to focus on the schedule of those students. It requires high schools to provide career fairs, which has already been a statutory regulation, but it puts a little bit more parameters, like the opportunity to do interviews with employers who have pre-apprenticeship or apprenticeship programs. It's going to take it's going to do a little bit on the college system and the state university system, the Board of Governors who regulates the state university system to adopt maybe some new regulations around credit and career education programs. So those are really interesting bills that are I think of interest to this group because of your interest in the ecosystem across the Tri-County. So that is a quick legislative update in terms of the political landscape, a couple of bills that are moving. And of course, right now, we're also behind the scenes in budget negotiations and conversations because the one statutory requirement that all legislators have each and every year is to pass a balanced budget. They don't have to pass a single bill on the policy front, but they do have to pass a balanced budget. And that debate has already begun between the chambers. So that is all I have for you guys today.
Which ones look like they are going to pass? Or is there a situation where, like, a pulse where you feel like this might not be, and
Yeah, it's a great question, Ashton, because usually by now you've had bills that have gone through 3 committee stops and you're like, okay, they're ready for the floor. In the education silo, like most bills have not been heard or they've had 1 committee stop. So it's really hard to tell. I do think middle school start times gets across the finish line because that is a bill that has every school district is here in Tallahassee lobbying to change that, to give them that flexibility. So I think that bill gets across the finish line. It's hard to say on a lot of the other bills. The workforce bill has moved, I think, through 2 committee stops, if I remember correctly. So that's getting some traction. But overall, bills are not moving. So it will be interesting to see what actually makes it across the finish line. I'll have a better assessment of that in the next couple, like next week or two.
okay.
That'll tell us what bills have actually kicked off. Because what could happen is a bill that has 4 references, right? So that means it has to be heard in committee at 4 different stops. All of a sudden next week, the speaker or the Senate president can come in and say, I'm going to take off from 4, let's go down to 2 committees, and they can change their references. So
Hmm.
if they do that, bills can move a little faster. So that'll be interesting to watch and see. Again, I say this legislative session is a little bit interesting, a little bit more interesting for all the different reasons, right? From just a process standpoint, it's been interesting to watch. And from the horse, like we always say there's horse trading that's happening. It's different because now you're not just trying to say like, I'll take that policy proposal if you take this one. You're trying to get the bills moving, and members are having to work their bills. They're having to go talk to other legislators to get bills on the agenda, and really push through the process. So in about a week or two, you'll have a better assessment of what policy proposals are really moving heavily. And I would be happy, Ashton, I can circle back with you in a couple weeks so you can send out kind of a
An
mid-month
update.
update to the group.
That's great. And I did hear for the cursive one, that it's also for documents. Like the Library of Congress did a call out for people that would read historical documents. And I was like, my time has arrived. I signed up to help. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
that was
I jokingly linked it to Cobalt, right? Like, so for the tech folks in the room, I'm like, yeah, cursive writing, it's like Cobalt. And we had to do a call of action to get people to come fix our state systems because they're all coded in Cobalt, and like 5 people in the country know how to do that. So
right, right. Well, Lisa, Tony, and Colleen, yeah, open for questions. Tony.
Hey Sheila, man, I'm so glad that you have information on this stuff. I always pictured that these proceedings to be like our larger districts school board meetings, like they could last 8 hours, and there's no break unless someone faints, and they have to be wheeled out. So thank you for doing this for us. Listen, I get, you send us stuff. We get stuff from other friends in Tallahassee. My director obviously gets some important things as well from Marsan Carr from Facti sends us a lot of stuff. She sent us something earlier in the week about the from the pre-K through 12 budget subcommittee that's proposing to slash FTE in half. And that's I mean, even our
Yes.
superintendent mentioned that at our board meeting this week. It's got us really, really nervous.
Okay,
So
so Tony, I have a call to action. Y'all need to go and speak to members on this, particularly Senator Burgess, Representative Persons Mullica, the K-12, that's K-12 Senate, K-12 House budget folks. Just for everyone on the call, so it's not a bill yet. It's a proposed committee bill. I should say it's a proposed committee bill. It hasn't been filed. It was in a committee packet. So to Tony's point, it was a discussion. It should be filed soon. Yesterday, I went to talk to the members, and they had said like, "Oh, you're the first to talk about this with us," and then to another friend, "You're the first." So like between me and one other friend, like we were the first to go around and start waving about this. So for those on the call and those listening on the recording, in Florida, we have a lot of bonus funds. One is for CAPE industry certifications. So as students earn industry certifications, there's bonus funding. There's funding for accelerated learning. So you score well on your AP exam, IB, ACE. There's bonus funding that flows to the school districts. And those funds, 80% of those funds are used to, back into the programs for the most part. The backstory is there was a survey. They went from the Department of Education to your CFOs at each of the districts. That survey data that was returned, it asked, how do you use the funds? Responses came in, department looked at it and said, oh, it looks like funds are not being spent. So here's the data point. Funds are not being spent. About 50% of the funds are not being spent, and therefore legislative recommendation to cut 50%. I don't know if there's total alignment between the House and the Senate on this proposal at the moment. It is a House proposal, but I would highly encourage every school district to make their voices known that this is potentially detrimental. What I shared with folks is that, there's a reason why Florida has, when you look at AP student participation, Florida is the hub of AP student participation because this is an incentive that drives districts to encourage kids to take accelerated learning. There's a reason why we have middle school students starting in middle school all the way through post-secondary that are earning industry certifications while earning their high school diplomas and associate's degrees. It's because we have incentivized that behavior, and districts have really pushed students to earn industry certifications. If you remove the funding and that bonus, do we still, it's a hypothetical question. Do we still continue to promote those courses? Do kids still take them? Maybe. But I do recognize in tough budgeting times, like every dollar counts. And so, but it would cut the funding weights in half. So 50% less of each of the bonus. And that's on a sliding scale because not all those bonuses are equal in dollar value.
And would those be bonuses for the teachers like we used to have? Like when I was in school, so a while ago, whenever we passed an AP test, our teacher would get a percentage. Is that from those funds or no?
Yeah, so those funding items, those bonuses it's like three sources. One is to the teacher, one is to the school, and one is to the district.
Okay.
So like the funding comes in and then it's dispersed in those three ways. For CAPE, maybe also for accelerated learning. But 80%, their statutory requirement is about 80% of those funds have to go back into those programs to grow those programs, whether that's professional development. There's several kind of components to that.
Okay. Right.
It didn't look like from the way I read it, my reading comprehension is not where it was when I was a budding student. So I could be way off, but from the way I read it, it didn't seem like they were going to take any of the teacher bonus money away, which is great on the one hand from a teacher standpoint, but from a school and a district standpoint, that means all of the cuts are coming from the district funds and the school funds. So the teachers still get their bonuses. The funding gets cut for the schools and the district, which means programs Look, I mean, we're not the biggest district in the state. I mean, we have 25 high schools, I think 26 high schools. Probably 2/3 of them have a decent amount of industry cert money. I'll use that as an example, stockpiled away, a couple $100,000. But 1/3 of our schools have nothing. They spend every penny of it every year, and then we take a bunch of it to buy, Certiport licenses and things like of that to cover them for the next school year. So a lot of our schools, they don't have that extra funding, and some of them, like you mentioned, go above and beyond. We'll say it that way. We'll try to keep it positive with AP and ACE and IB. So they're the ones that are going to lose their minds, and I just feel like we're kind of middle of the road. I feel like counties like Lisa's and then Miami-Dade and Hillsborough and some of the counties that are way bigger than ours, they're going to lose their minds because this is how their programs fund themselves. We're not supposed to be supplanting or whatever it's called, but these programs don't exist without that funding. And I think that's what the folks maybe in Tallahassee don't quite understand, that laser engraver and that really awesome engineering program is funded by industry cert money and can't survive without it. The kids are not going to have the ability to use the tools that are available in industry if the school can't buy them every time a new tool comes out. So
Yeah,
I'll get off
Tony,
myself.
you're right. The language does protect the teacher bonus component of that. So that is absolutely, your reading comprehension is spot on. Look, I will tell you though, the school district, I mean, this proposal hit, I think Tuesday or Wednesday, in discussion in committee, subcommittee. Again, it's only in the House, and every school district has, there's a text train of lobbyists, internal and external, for school districts, and the call has gone out to all the folks, so there is a statewide strategy in place, and everyone is working, but part of that is like districts reaching out to budget chiefs, superintendents, school board members. What's great is school board members have been here all week in town. So everyone is talking about the language and the impacts. But it's just another example of like when requests come in from the department for survey data, sometimes I know it goes to different folks in each school district, and those responses usually have some type of policy impact that we see. So just something we're working through.
So what was the bill number for that we're talking about? Is that SB 1618? Sorry, I didn't look at the details.
No, this is not this is what we call a proposed committee bill. So it hasn't been filed yet. I haven't seen it filed yet as of last night. It is in discussion form right now.
Is there a number for it so I can tell our lobbying folks?
No, it hasn't been filed yet, so no number is recorded to it right now.
Darn it. Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question. Outside of education, Senate President Ben Albritton, this idea of removing property taxes so that we can all save money, and then we have, we're going to take away from social services and education. Do you have any sense of the likelihood of that going anywhere?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a debate right now whether, and so it's more of an intent, like, does this impact school districts or does it just impact other local government entities? And that I have not had clarification on. Even talking to school district board members this week, they're having conversations just in case it impacts school districts, but we're not 100% sure. Does that impact, like, if there's a bond referendum or some type of voter approved referendum, there's that conversation. There's also the conversation of the guaranteed school districts statutorily are allowed. It is based in the Florida statute around, I think, 1.5 up to 2 mills that they're able to levy. So like $1.50 for every $100,000 of assessed property value. And so, the question is like, are you going to remove that statutory language in there? What trumps what? So there's a lot of moving conversations. I would say anything that's a President Albritton or Speaker Perez priority has a very good shot of making it through in some way or fashion. It might look different by the end when they make different compromises to get things across the finish line, but anything in that rural renaissance package is you know, is another one that has a very high likelihood in a short policy year. This will those definitely will make it across the finish line at some, again, in some shape or fashion.
Thank you.
Lisa or anyone else, do you have any questions?
No, this is helpful. The computer science funds are still in the budget, but lowered, right? What I saw last.
So we're not right now. We're in. So the governor recommended cutting the funds from 10 million to 8.5. But the way the budgeting works is that's just a recommendation, and so that gets parked, and then the legislature looks at previous budgets. They look at what is committed, what they need to fund for, and then they start building their own budget. So I don't know if the legislature will also decrease down to 8.5. Although when the department and the governor is recommending it, there's a potential they decrease.
Okay. And Sheila, I know that you have to run, so thank you so much for the legislative update. For the call to action, and I can text you to clarify, but I can send the call to action in the follow-up with sending the recording and the notes. So I am happy to be able to clarify that, and then that way we can get people that weren't able to make it.
Yeah, I think that's more your school districts, and I will say they're already actively engaged.
Oh, okay.
I'm glad Tony brought it up. I am grateful to all of you for keeping me on my toes and asking me things that I wasn't prepared to talk about at 8 o'clock this morning. And so I'm also surprised that it is somewhat in my mind. So I got home at midnight last night. I am not functioning completely this morning, so I apologize. But yeah, now I feel like I'm a pretty decent lobbyist that I have all that information sitting there ready to go. But we will definitely keep you, Ashton, I'll keep you posted. We can do a mid-session. We can in like 2 weeks do like a mid-month update for everyone.
Right.
And then on the call to action, I will say again, school districts are engaged, but we can put a little blurb in there because that does impact, I think, these folks too, if it gets filed in the next week, but likelihood it will.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Go fight the good fight. We're
Bye,
glad you're
friends.
here.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
See you,
Bye.
Sheila.